Hi everyone, I'm Mercedes from Rocky Nook. Thank you so much for joining us today for this exciting webinar with Jordana on travel photography. If you haven't received her book yet, The Enthusiast Guide to Travel Photography, it is available for sale now in our Rocky Nook bookstore, and you could probably find it in your local bookstore and also on Amazon. We'll also be offering you a 40% off coupon code if you haven't purchased this book yet and you want to, or you decide you want to after the webinar. So you can take 40% off your purchase at rockynook.com. We'll give you information on that in a little bit, and we'll also send it to you in your email tomorrow when you receive a link to the webinar replay video. So just keep in mind, if something's moving too fast for you in this presentation, tomorrow you'll be emailed a link so you can watch it again at your convenience. So I just want to tell you a little bit about Jordana Wright, who's joining us today from Chicago. For the past decade, Jordana has had the opportunity to shoot professionally, travel, and share her love of photography with clients, workshops, and aspiring photographers around the world. She's presented 2 TEDx talks, led dozens of photo walks across the United States, been published in a variety of media outlets, including the New York Times, and has developed and executed a variety of exciting personal photographic projects. When she's not going places and seeing stuff, she lives in Chicago, although I think that might be changing soon, with her husband and her 12-year-old pit bull. For more information about Jordana, you can visit her website, jordanawright.com, and you can find her Instagram and Facebook pages. We're really excited to have Jordana here with us today. She's going to teach you about how to pack your carry-on bags and keep all your gear in one carry-on. And then she's going to show us a little video too, taking us into the woods to teach us some stuff. So I will turn this over to Jordana.
Hi. So yeah, as Mercedes said, I am actually getting ready to leave Chicago. That is changing. I'm going to be moving to Denver as of next month, which I'm super excited about. There's going to be a lot more adventure and wildlife photography in my future. So I'll have to use some of my own advice and go out and shoot. So thanks for joining us today. I am excited to share a few of my favorite points from the book with you. We're going to get started by talking about gear and how I pack, and then we're going to move on to discussing shooting in the woods, which is one of my favorite places to photograph. So for starters, basically when I travel, I try to keep things as light as possible. There's 2 different schools of thought, basically what I call in the book, the more the merrier, and then keeping things as light as possible. I always go on the light end of things. Let me give you a quick screen share, and I will show you some points from the book. So basically, this is my friend Nick. He's a Chicago photographer. We shoot weddings together. And as you can see, he is entirely encumbered with stuff. When I travel, this is like a nightmare to me. This is not how I want to travel at all. But in this case, he was shooting a commercial shoot for a resort in the Bahamas. So he needed as much stuff as possible. He was working with basically complicated lighting setups. He needed a lot of tripods. He was working with models. So if you're involved in a tech-heavy shoot, this is the kind of stuff that you need, and sorry to break it to you, you're gonna have to check some luggage. So if you're talking about lighting, stands, reflectors, drones, underwater housing, any of these kinds of things, you're stuck with this much stuff. And I'm sorry, but make the best of it. Otherwise, ideally, hopefully, you can keep it as light as possible. So when I travel carry-on only. This is like my new religion is light and easy. I have a 2-bag setup. I use a Pelican and a backpack, or a backpack and a messenger bag for shorter trips. I try to keep things modular, and that allows me to be really flexible. And then I digitize as much as possible. And I plan to do laundry on my trips. So you will see some more about this in just a sec. Let me switch it back to the webcam. Okay, so I'm going to show you my setup. So this is a Pelican 1510. Let me tilt this down a little so you can see a little better. So the Pelican 1510 is the carry-on approved size. You can get this in the overhead bin of most airplanes. In some situations, I've needed to put it under the seat in front of me, but it usually fits. In the very rare cases where I'm in like a super tiny puddle jumper or something, I usually talk to the flight attendants and see what I can do, or even the pilot if it's a small enough plane, and see what I can do, because basically this never leaves my sight. There have been times where if I'm group number 6 or whatever to board a plane, I've had to argue and say, you know, this is photo gear and I'm not going to let it out of my sight. So I've actually taken a later flight in some of those conditions. But that's just me. Everybody has their own theories on what works best. But in my case, I try to keep it in front of me at all times. So when I'm traveling with a Pelican and a backpack, this is the backpack I'm using right now. It's a Timbuktu backpack. It's not a photo-specific backpack by any means. I actually really don't enjoy traveling with photography labeled backpacks. I think it makes you a target. People know that you're carrying expensive gear, and they're not as flexible for all situations. So let's jump into the Pelican, and I'll show you kind of how I organize and break stuff down. So the first thing that's really important to me is that I have to be able to physically lift this at all times. Like if I can't put this in the overhead bin myself, then that really is frustrating for me. I don't want to be one of those women who has to stand in the aisle and wait for some big guy to help me put something in the overhead bin. That's just not my style. So I practice lifting it at home. If it's too heavy, I take stuff out. I don't want this to become an encumbrance for me as I'm traveling. So I always leave it locked. I have a TSA approved 3-number lock. And the Pelicans are designed with these really nice, I think you can see, with these really nice, very secure metal keepers here, so you can get a lock in there and protect your gear. Regardless of what I'm doing, if I'm not actively in my case, I keep it closed and locked. That way, if I step away, somebody can't just slip in and grab something. Okay, so as I said, this is the 1510. They actually make one that's slightly lighter, empty right now. So look into that if you're a little worried about the empty weight of this. I think on its own, this weighs about 3 or 4 pounds empty. I purchased a organizer for the lid so that I can keep everything exactly where I can see it. And then I'm going to go through each of these little accessories and compartments and stuff and kind of give you a little breakdown. So as I said, modular is key. I really love these camera inserts. This allows me to protect my camera, protect my lenses, and then when I get where I'm going, I can take this out and put it into my backpack. No problem, super easy. On travel days, typically I'll keep my gear in the Pelican. As soon as I get where I'm going, I'll take my clothing out of my backpack, put it in my Pelican, or just leave it to the side, and then move whatever gear I need into the backpack. It's super easy, really convenient, and it just sort of streamlines the entire process. All right, so let me go back to the screen share for a second, and I'm going to show you the next slide. Okay, so one of the #1 things you want to do to minimize how much stuff you have to carry is to put as much stuff as possible onto your phone. So before I travel, I download an offline map from Google Maps, and that will allow me to do turn-by-turn directions without needing to use a data plan. So if you're traveling internationally, it's a huge time saver. It's a huge money saver as well. I always download specific phrases that I know I'm going to use. I love Google Translate because I can type something in and press the little microphone button and it'll read it aloud to the person. So if my pronunciation is terrible, at least Google can kind of cover me a little bit with that. Specific phrases I always put in are things like, I'm allergic to peppers. So I make sure ahead of time that I have that ready to go. So if I'm in a restaurant, I can tell somebody and not end up dying somewhere. Inconvenient. So then I also include my in case of emergency info. As far as that, you want to have a phone number of somebody who's going to reach you. You want to have any life-saving medications that you need, allergies, things like that, you can actually save those certain items to the lock screen of your phone so that if you're incapacitated for some reason, somebody can see that information without getting into your phone. So that can also be a really good help. I keep a copy of my travel docs, so I'll scan my passport and upload it to my Google Drive. I keep a copy of all my confirmations, my hotel information, if I've arranged specific tours, things like that, so that I can just access it on the fly without carrying all of this extra paper. I always load my phone up with music that I can listen to offline because I think every good trip deserves its own soundtrack. And then my camera manual. So even though I've had the same camera for a number of years now and I know it inside and out, every so often there will be some kind of error or something gets screwed up and I want to fix it. So what I'll do is I'll open it up as a PDF in my phone, and then you can actually search for terms. And that way you're not carrying around a bulky camera manual. All these things are going to add up and increase the weight of what you're carrying with you. So by digitizing, you're really going to save yourself a lot of worry. Easy Release is a fantastic app that is a paid app. I think it's like $7 or $8. But basically, it is a model release app that is on your phone, and then you can create model releases, have the person fill out all of their information, and then sign it with their finger. It'll even translate those releases into, I think, 7 or 8 different languages. So if you have this amazing moment, you want to take a portrait, and you want to make sure you're covered to be able to enter contests or sell the pictures ultimately, Easy Release is going to be a big help. The other thing you want to think about is your kill switch. So let's say I'm someplace and I get pickpocketed or someone steals my phone off of the table or something. I want to be able to log into my phone from my computer and kill the phone so that it's completely useless. They can't steal my personal information. So that's a good thing to have. Lots of phones come with that built into it, but you want to download an app if your camera or if your particular phone doesn't have it. And then ebooks and travel guides. So I read a lot when I travel. I like to use my guidebooks, but there's no reason to carry all of that physical weight. So I'll put my books in my phone, or sometimes I'll load my books onto my laptop instead of carrying an extra e-reader with me. So all of these things are going to add up over time. Okay, so let's talk about what's in my camera bag. I'm going to rattle through this list real quick, and then I'll show you in the box what I have in there. So 2 camera bodies. I think it's always a good idea to have a spare. 1 zoom lens, 1 wide lens, 1 prime lens, a travel tripod, a platypod, filters, extra batteries, memory cards, my hard drive, chargers and cables, a flashlight, an extension tube, snacks, microfiber towel, jar gripper, gaff tape, ear bulb, shower cap, badge clip, camera strap, bike lock, and Band-Aids. Okay, so let's go back and I will give you a little tour. Okay, so that's a lot of stuff that's in this one container. So let's start in the lid. Up here is where I keep my memory cards. So your memory card should always be in a case like this. There's a lot of different people out there on the market that are developing these. It's waterproof, it'll float. It's shockproof, it's drop-proof. It's going to keep all of my cards in nice, safe condition. So this is a must. If you're somebody who's still using those little clear plastic ones that the cases come in when you buy them, that's crazy. You're going to lose them. Invest in one of these. It's super worthwhile. The other thing to note is every day when I travel, I back up all of my pictures onto a hard drive. When I'm out and about, I either have my memory cards with me or I have my hard drive with me, never both. So I keep one in one location and one in the other, and that way if something happens, my hotel burns down or it gets robbed or I get robbed or something, I still have those pictures in the world. Okay, so in here I have a bunch of lens cloths because they get dirty really easily and then you can't necessarily clean them, wash them while you're on the road. I also have my tripod mounts. Let's see. So that's kind of what's in this spot. Moving over, I carry a little reflector. I have a tendency to do a lot of food photography when I travel. I think it's one of those things that helps demonstrate the local flavors and customs, and it's nice to be able to photograph that kind of stuff when you're traveling as well. So I have just a really small disc reflector, silver on one side, gold on the other. I use this when I'm shooting food to help fill in the shadows, so it's really nice, attractive lighting. I think you'll see that there's actually a picture of me using this during a food shoot in the food section of the book. So, reflector. Jar gripper. Now, anybody who's ever had two filters stuck together, or a filter that gets stuck on the end of your lens, knows that it's super frustrating and you always worry you're gonna break it or like crack the glass somehow. So these are, you can get them on Amazon, they're called jar grippers. People used to print these with like their company names and stuff on them and give them out for free. If you buy them, they're maybe $1. So I have a couple of these, and I always make sure I have one in my camera bag. And that way, if there's something that I need to get, if I need to remove the filters, separate them, whatever, I have this. Now they do make a filter removing tool. I just think it takes up more space than necessary, and this is just super lightweight and cheap. So I'm always a fan of the easiest way to achieve something, and this is the easiest way. I said badge clips. So anybody who's ever been to a conference has gotten one of these, right? So for your name tag. So when I'm out shooting, what I'll do is take my lens cap and I use one of these badge clips to hold it. And then I just put it through my belt loop, or I can loop it through on my backpack or something like that. Because otherwise, if I don't do this, then I end up wanting to put my lens cap back on, and I have to pat all my pockets to see which pocket I put it in. That's like my normal routine, and I'm tired of it. So this has been a good solution for me. So next time you have to go to a conference, think about the fact that you're getting a free photo accessory in the process. So I have a couple of those. So this is a baby nasal aspirator, also known as an ear bulb. And basically it does the same thing as those expensive rocket blowers. Those things can be anywhere between like $15 and $30, depending on how big they are. They are heavy, they really aren't flexible, and they take up a lot of space in your camera bag. So I have one for when I'm shooting studio stuff, but when I'm on the road, I use one of these. I like it because it's two pieces, so if I need to clean it out on the inside, rinse it or whatever, I totally can. You can also put it in the other way to save a little bit more space. You can get these at any drugstore. I think this one was $4. So if you need to get some debris off of your lens or get some sand out of wherever, this is a good option. Okay, so that's that pocket. Down here, down here is my battery center. So I have my camera battery chargers and a couple of spare batteries. I always travel with at least 4 batteries for my camera. A lot of people like to save money whenever possible. So there's a real tendency to purchase the off-brand batteries. The problem with those is over time, they're gonna not hold a charge as effectively. So it's worth it to just spend a little bit of extra money. It's probably only gonna be like a $20 difference. Get your camera brand battery. It's gonna save you in the long run. Okay, so I have that in there. This is my little battery zone. In this pocket, I have a shower cap. Regular old hotel shower cap that they give you for free. I actually have a box of these because I use them pretty frequently. So let's say you're out shooting and you have like a pop-up storm or something that you weren't expecting. This folds down to nothing and you can just tuck it in your camera bag. And it's not going to help in like a torrential downpour, but it is going to help in a smaller rain. You can just put it around your camera and let the elastic go around the lens, because usually the lenses are pretty watertight. It's more the connection between the body and the lens that you're worried about. And then you can still see everything. You can have access to the full camera, all the settings. If you want to, you can even rip a little hole and put the eye cup over it so that you're still getting a clear viewfinder. So this is just like a little backup just in case. It's a good idea to have it with you. There are really nice, really expensive rain covers on the market, but I find that once you use them once or twice, they're never as good, and you end up having to buy them and rebuy them. So I like this. It works for me. So that's the shower cap. Next, I have two different trigger releases. So I have a wired one, and then I have an infrared. Not all cameras will do the wireless infrared, but I like having both for different situations. This is nice if I need to be farther away from my camera. I just have to have line of sight. This one requires me to be right there. Now, anybody who's ever done night photography or longer exposures, shooting in the bulb setting, anything over 30 seconds, this is going to save you, because let's say you want to do a 45-second exposure. Well, you have to push the button and then hold it that entire time. Versus with this, you click it once and then you click it again when you're ready to close the shutter. So this is definitely a valuable thing to have in your camera bag. Okay. Next we have granola bars. I have snacks in every pocket of every bag that I travel with. I keep snacks in my camera bag. I keep snacks in my backpack. I keep snacks everywhere because I am somebody who hunger is a real issue for me. So if I want my photographs to be the best possible quality, then I want to not be hangry. So snacks are always a good option. Now we're getting into this pocket here. This is called a Cyber Power, and I'll show you. It has just a 3-prong outlet and a USB charger, and it fits in your car charger. I always travel with this because there have been times that I need to drive from point A to point B, and that is the only time that I can charge my laptop or charge my camera battery or whatever. So the ability to use a car charger for your regular electronics is huge. This does make quite a bit of noise because it has a little fan in it because it's inverting the power, but it is definitely worth it in the long run. They make ones that have a lot more plugins. They make this one that's got the USB. I think you can get one that's all USBs. It just depends on what your particular needs are. I also travel with a regular extension cord. When I'm in a hotel, I get so frustrated with like one outlet in this lamp and one outlet in that lamp. So what I'll do is just plug this in and then charge all of my stuff in one place. That way I don't forget anything. If you have lots of things charging all over the place, you're more likely to forget something when you leave. So this is a good option as well. This is a little LED book light that just charges with a USB. I just need to plug this into my laptop and it'll charge it. Otherwise, I'll use a headlamp. You have multiple options, but you always want to have some kind of a flashlight with you. LED is the best because it uses the least power and has the most light output. Wet wipes, because I usually end up getting filthy and then, hiking around, scrambling, touching stuff. And then if I want to touch my gear, then I'm nervous about like getting all my stuff dirty. So wet wipes, always super helpful. Band-aids, because I have a tendency to get so focused in what I'm doing with my camera that I trip or injure myself. This is a regular thing. Band-aids are a must-have for any photography kit. You also want to have like an alcohol wipe or whatever little first aid kit that you need. And then gaff tape. So for anyone who's not familiar, gaff or gaffer's tape is a fantastic type of tape. It comes in a big roll. I think it's about $20 a roll, but it is super worth it. Basically, it is a fabric tape with an adhesive side on it. So it's physically woven. And the thing that's nice about it for photography is that it doesn't leave a residue. So you can use this on your gear, you can put it on cords, whatever, and when you peel it off, it's not going to leave that like sticky nastiness behind. So rather than carry a big heavy roll of it, I'll just wrap a couple yards around a pencil, and then I have a little pencil grippy, and I also have gaff tape when I need it. So think about that as an option. Okay, so now delving into the main compartment here. Okay, so as I said, I always use these modular bags. This one was by Kata, K-A-T-A, and it's really nice, but it's discontinued. So if you want something similar, just Google or search Amazon for camera insert or padded camera insert, and you'll find something similar. So in here, I have my backup camera. Just to show you, this is gaff tape because one time in the field, the rubber grippy part fell off, and that's a real thing that happens apparently with a lot of cameras. So I covered it with gaff tape, kept it protected, keeps it dry. So gaff tape is good for anything. So spare camera body. I rarely take it out with me. I usually just leave it in the hotel, but I know that if something happens to my primary camera, I have a backup. And then this is my little pancake lens that I love. It's the Canon 24mm. What's nice about this is if you're shooting street photography or something, it's really unobtrusive. People don't notice it. It's not a big deal, and it's super lightweight and small. So I usually keep something small and short like this in my bag just for those situations where I want to kind of keep it light. So that's one lens that's in here. I have my Canon 10-22. So you always want to have something that's in the wider spectrum, especially if you're going someplace like Europe, for instance, where the streets are much closer together, right, because it was built in a different era. So you can't always get as far back as you want to shoot the architecture. So a really wide angle lens like this is going to help you because you're going to be able to still get those facades without being able to back up physically. So 10-22. And then this is my 100mm macro. Now I do say in the book, and I generally recommend, don't double up on millimeters. So I have my 10-22, then I have my regular walking around, which is my 18-300. So that covers me from 10-300, right? So I shouldn't necessarily need this lens, but this is such a beautiful lens for macro, for food photography, even for portraits, that when I'm going someplace that I think it might be handy, I'll break my own rule and bring this guy along as well. So that's everything that's in this camera insert. So now let's talk about filters. So I keep all of my filters in one thing. It's just easier. I think if you have lots of little pouches, you're going to spend more time going through stuff, scrambling, trying to find the right accessory. So all of my filters are in one. I usually organize them by the size. Something to keep in mind, and let me see where it is. If you want to save money with your filters, investigate step-down rings. So if you're not familiar with what these are, a step-down ring is just this little plain metal ring. Go for metal rather than plastic. It's much more durable. And basically you would buy the filter for your largest lens measurement and then the step-down ring to convert it to your smaller lenses. So that way I can buy things for my 10-22. I can buy filters that work on my 10-22, but I'll still be able to use them on other things as well. Types of filters that are in my bag. I love a graduating neutral density filter. Great for sunsets when the landscape is much darker than the sky in front of you. You want to even those out with a filter. I always travel with a circular polarizer. I like just a straight neutral density for those longer exposures where I'm trying to blur water or blur people's movement, things like that. I also use a magnifying filter so that I can get even more magnification on my macro shots. Trouble with those is that they do have some distortion because basically it's a magnifying lens and the curvature of the glass is going to cause some wonky distortion around the periphery. But it's a nice option to get a little bit more out of your lenses, and it's not super expensive and they're not really heavy at all. So that's my filter situation. This case is really handy. I'm a big fan of it. So putting them all in one case, always helpful. Let's see what else I have in here. So another thing that I have is a travel tripod. This isn't my normal travel tripod. Typically, I use the Manfrotto Be Free. It comes in aluminum and it also comes in carbon fiber. For the cost weight difference, I think the aluminum is good enough. It's nice and sturdy. It's still really light, but it's about $150 cheaper. At least it was when I got it. So for a travel tripod, I think the aluminum is fabulous. If you want to have like the fanciest, most expensive gear, carbon fiber is great too. The point is just that you want something small and compact, because the bigger your tripod is, the less likely you're going to want to bring it with you. And it doesn't do you any good if it's sitting back in your hotel room. So I have a tripod that fits inside my case so that all of my gear is in one place on travel days. Along those lines, I also have the Platypod. This is the Max, Platypod Max. So basically, I can take my ball head off of my travel tripod and I can screw it on here and then use this as my tripod as well. So what's nice about this is if you're in a museum or a church or someplace that's not going to allow a regular tripod, they usually don't pay attention to these. So you can still get that image stabilizing aspect without having this big three-legged thing that people are tripping over and looking at. Something to note about this is it has these little feet that come out of this right here. So these feet are fantastic, and they're actually magnetic to stay in this so that they won't fall out. And basically you can thread them in any number of these holes that are all over the top here. You can use the spike side down if you're trying to get a little bit more like grip or whatever, or you can use the rubber side down if you're on a surface you're afraid of scratching. Super handy. Trouble with these, every time I go through, I get flagged by TSA because they see the spikiness in my bag. So ultimately they let me through, but just keep in mind that if you are carrying this, you might get flagged for additional review. But this is a really fabulous product. I use it a lot. In fact, there's a couple of chapters in the book where I talk about specific times that I had to use this specifically because a regular tripod wasn't an option. So good to use. They do make it in other sizes. There's a smaller one that's nice for like a mirrorless camera, but if you're shooting with a full-size SLR, DSLR, you want the Max because that's going to provide the best support for your camera. Other stuff that's in here, just a backpack cover for if it suddenly starts raining. I have a waterproof backpack, but you never know how long those things are going to last or if it's going to stand up to all situations. So this is just a backpack cover. You can get them at any sports store. The other nice thing is if you're in a pickpocket heavy area, you can just put this on over your bag and it's one more thing that they have to mess with to get through your stuff. So it's just a little bit of added security as well. So that is what's in my camera bag. Let's go back to the screen share and then I'll talk about what I keep in my other bag. Oh, and bike lock is something I forgot to mention. Many times when I am traveling, I will use a bike lock to lock my case up either to something in my trunk that can't be removed easily, or I'll lock it to like a pipe or a bed frame or something so that if somebody breaks into my hotel room or breaks into my car, they can't just grab my whole case and go. Like they've got to fight with it first. Okay, so what's in my other bag? Clothing. Generally, I do half as many outfits as I have days, and I just plan to do laundry. Wash your clothes in your sink. You can, for a pretty small fee, usually have somebody in the hotel do it. Whatever works best for you, but you don't need as much clothing as you think you do, especially if it's a photography-related excursion. 2 pairs of shoes, one to wear, one to pack. The ability to change your shoes after a long day hiking is, I can't say enough for it. So don't pigeonhole yourself into one pair of shoes or you'll get exhausted and your feet will be really sad. I travel with a mosquito net when I am in tropical areas. I tend to be allergic to mosquitoes, so rather than being miserable, I just pack that little extra bit of weight. It's a big help, and then you can also use it as a pillow on the plane when it's all packed up. My toiletries, I try to rely on what the hotel is going to have as much as possible. If I need more than can fit in that 3-ounce rule, then I'll just buy stuff when I get there. First aid kit and medications, journal and pen. So I recommend having a physical notebook as your journal. There's just something about writing it out in the old-fashioned way that I think kind of adds an element of romance, and it's also nicer because if you're sitting at a table and you're writing in a journal physically rather than like looking at your phone or your laptop, you're a little bit more approachable. So you're not necessarily going to miss out on those like interactions with random people along the way. So I'm super into the longhand journal writing. So give it a try. Plastic bags of several sizes, whether you're picking up shells on the beach or you're just trying to segregate your dirty shoes from your stuff, plastic bags will help you. A raincoat is very handy because you can actually use it as an extra level of waterproofing around your gear. So if it's a situation where you don't care about yourself getting wet, but you want to make sure your gear is extra protected, just wrap it around your gear inside your bag. Permethrin, going back to the mosquito issue, Permethrin is a spray that you can buy on Amazon and in outdoor stores, sporting goods stores. You basically pre-spray it on all of your clothing. So when I am packing, what I'll do is hang up all of my clothing in the shower. I hang up everything that I'm going to pack, and then I spray it all down with the Permethrin. I let it dry, and then I pack all my stuff. And basically the Permethrin is a nice mosquito repellent that you're not putting physically on your skin, so you don't have to worry as much about what's in it. And then also it lasts through like 4 to 6 washes. So you can spray your clothing once, and even if you do laundry, you know that your clothing will still help protect you against mosquitoes. So I love Permethrin. The last thing that was on that list was my Chromebook. So when I travel, I do not bring my full laptop situation. I have enough expensive gear with me that I don't really want to add to it with $1,000, $2,000 laptop. That's just another thing that you can lose or damage or whatever. So Chromebooks are fabulous, and you can actually run Lightroom Mobile on them. So Lightroom Mobile allows you to do any road editing that you need to do. It'll process raw images. It's just a fantastic, easy, light program. So my Chromebook is like $300. If something happens to it, it's not the end of the world. And it allows me to still stay connected and back up my images without worrying about this extra bit of gear. So yeah, that's what's in my bag. If you guys have any questions, you can start submitting those, and we can go through it. But basically, yeah, I can't say enough good things about the Pelican. They come with a lifetime warranty. I actually had one get damaged by the TSA, and Pelican replaced it for me. So really no questions asked. You just send them a picture of the damage, and then they'll replace it. So that's a really nice thing to have. They're waterproof. If your boat sinks, you can hold on to it and float. You got all kinds of options with the Pelican. Sometimes I sit on it. Sometimes I stand on it to get extra height for an image. Lots of stuff going. Mercedes, do we have any questions?
Hey, Jordana, we have a couple questions.
Okay.
It looks like a few people tuned in kind of late. So can you mention again what kind of Pelican bag that is and your other bag as well?
Yeah, so the Pelican is the Pelican 1510, and that's the approved carry-on size. So it has wheels and a handle and everything. There is another version of it that I believe is called the Pelican Air, and that actually is a little bit lighter when it's empty, but just as sturdy and protective. But yeah, the 1510 is the model that you want. And then for my backpack, as I mentioned earlier, I just have just a regular backpack. This one's by Timbuktu. I really like it. I've been using it for years, and I prefer to not use a backpack that's specific to photography, because if I'm walking around and somebody sees that photo logo on my backpack, they know I have gear. So it's better for me to use that kind of thing with a padded camera insert to protect my gear and keep it organized. And that way I'm a little bit more under the radar.
Great. And also, what was that SD card case that you recommended?
Sure. So there are a bunch of different companies that have them. I would have to look up. This basically just Google or Amazon or search on Amazon for a waterproof SD card case. I don't know the exact manufacturer on this one because it doesn't have its name on it anywhere. And I bought it about 10 years ago, which goes to show that they last forever. So definitely grab one of these. Make sure it's waterproof. Make sure it floats. Hard, heavy plastic will really keep you protected.
And what about batteries in your carry-on? People are saying that they thought TSA is trying to make more restrictions on batteries. Have you noticed that, or have you had any problem traveling with batteries?
So I haven't had any issue. What I had been hearing was that there's more of a problem with checking the lithium batteries, because then it's under the plane, and if there's an issue, they can't stop it. Like if it explodes or something, they can't stop it from happening. So in my checked bag, I've never had a problem with it. I travel with 4 of them. And it hasn't been an issue. If for some reason it was going to be an issue and I was concerned about it, then I would research photo gear providers at my destination and maybe just pick up an extra battery or 2 when I arrived.
Great. And that looks like it for questions on that topic right now. Do you want to move into the second portion?
Yeah, absolutely. We could start talking about the woods.
Great. So we're going to show a little video for you guys, and then Jordana will come back and answer any questions you have.
There are a lot of things to think about when you're photographing in woods. We walk into these wood settings and they're big and they're beautiful and there's so many details, and there's not only a lot of height to witness, but there's also a lot of depth. And it can be really difficult to identify what specifically you want to photograph. Things that make sense in person don't necessarily photograph as well in a camera. So when you're approaching a scene, you want to take a look at the width of things. If it's a really wide scene, sure, use your wide angle lens, but maybe make sure that you have something that's going to guide the viewer's eye through the frame. So things that would work would be a path or a boardwalk, or just some sort of natural clearing where there's some negative space in the middle of the frame that helps carry the image. When you're photographing in the forest and you want to try to get a little bit of variety with your images, it helps to take a different perspective. So if you have the opportunity to get above the canopy, maybe on like a canopy tour or something where there's a nice high lookout, definitely take that opportunity because it gives you a unique perspective. The other option is to photograph looking up. So I would take my camera to the base of an interesting tree and then crouch down and maybe shoot up along the trunk, getting a nice long depth of field, maybe shoot around an f/16 or something even closer to an f/22. And that's going to allow you to get a totally unique perspective, looking up at the branches, seeing the way it branches out, and really getting a nice rich color of those backlit leaves. So one of the nice bonuses of photographing in the woods is when you come around a corner and you see a beautiful vista like the one that we have right here. So when I'm shooting a vista, something that I want to remember is that you need something in the foreground to draw the viewer's eye through the frame. What looks nice to a passing viewer wouldn't necessarily make the strongest photograph. So by adding a point of interest in the foreground, you're going to really improve your images. Right now, because it's a pretty deep scene, I want to shoot with the maximum depth of field that's available to me. I'm actually going to start shooting at an aperture of f/14. So small opening, bigger depth of field. So in the chapter Working Around Uncontrollable Conditions, I talk about what to do if you're in a beautiful location, but the light doesn't really do anything for you. So right now I'm on the edge of this beautiful lake, and the sky is pretty overcast, the lighting is kind of flat and even. So even though it's a gorgeous location, it's not the most interesting lighting conditions. So in this case, what I'm going to do is photograph without including the sky in my image, or at least trying to minimize the sky as much as possible. I'm going to make it about the form and the shape of the trees, the line of these cattails, little details like that. And the fact that it's overcast, all of these greens are really going to pop and they're going to look really beautiful. So we'll find a shot even though the skies aren't ideal. When you find yourself in really dense woods, the impulse to shoot with a wide-angle lens to capture the full scope of the scene is a generally good impulse, but if you want to try to narrow the field down a little bit more to show the viewer where to look and make things feel a little bit less chaotic, I recommend shooting with a longer millimeter lens, something in the range of 100 to 300 millimeters. What that's going to do is visually compress the distance and sort of work through that chaos for the viewer, making it into a more understandable, easier to read pattern of trees, branches, bark, that kind of thing. When we're shooting in the woods, it's really easy to get overwhelmed and spend our time focusing on the larger scene. Something that you can do to sort of refresh and get back to the basics is focus on the little details around you. You'll find things like interesting patterns of leaves, random wildflowers, nice moss like this on a fallen log. Take the moment to go through and photograph those little details, and it's going to help tell more of a story of each location that you visit. So it's pretty rainy in Brown County Park right now, but it's creating this beautiful fog effect. So I had to pull over just now because I love the way that this road looks, the way that the fog kind of combines with the fresh blacktop, and it makes it so that you can't really see what's what. So I'm going to photograph this real quick, and then I'll show you guys the resulting pictures, but I think it's going to be really cool. So now I'm standing about 20 feet away from where I was just a moment ago, and it always pays to look behind you. Whenever you think something looks beautiful, getting the 180-degree view, you're going to get something totally different and maybe equally incredible. So right now, because of the rain, we have this wild fog rolling in, which is creating an effect that I will refer to in the book as receding layers of tone. It's one of my favorite atmospheric effects, and that's basically where the closer something is to the subject or to the viewer, the darker it will appear in gradients of color. So you have these nice gradients receding back as a result of the fog. They apparently call this park the Smokies of the Midwest, and right now you can kind of see why.
Thanks,
Okay,
Jordana. That video was great.
thanks.
We don't have any questions at the moment. I'm sure they'll come in the next few minutes. So do you want to tell us a little bit about what it was like for you shooting that video?
Sure, yeah. So I just took a quick little weekend getaway to Brown County, Indiana, which is about 5 hours outside of Chicago. And we actually got really terrible weather while I was there, which, I mean, it's a give and a take. Sometimes it's nice to have some overcast weather. It kind of helps even out the lighting, especially when you're in woods. If you have super bright sunlight, then you're going to get a lot of bright highlights and then deep shadows. So that dappled light can really throw things off. And I don't really tend to shoot HDR very often. I try to keep it to like one shot and then just adjust my highlights and shadows in RAW. So it's actually nice in those scenarios when it's overcast, but I got to take some of my own advice because of the rain. One of the other things that I didn't mention in that video is that it is totally okay to take a picture from inside your car as long as you are stopped. There will be a lot of times that I'll see something roadside that I want to photograph, so I'll just pull off safely, find a good place to stop, roll the window down and shoot from there. If you have a full selection of lenses with you, there's no reason that you can't get the shot, and that just gives you a little bit of extra weather protection. So yeah, it was a really nice trip. Too bad that we got all that rain, but it really created that cool atmospheric effect at the end. So I really enjoyed that aspect of it.
So we do have some questions coming in now.
Okay.
Jacqueline is asking, what is the size of the small reflector that you travel with?
Yeah, so it's just a 12-inch. So they come in a variety of sizes. When I do studio work and stuff, I usually use a much bigger one, maybe a 2-foot or 3-foot and up. But this is just a 12-inch, so it shrinks down, super compact to fit in your bag. They do also make them that have the zip-off reflector aspect, so that in the middle it's just that white scrim. And what's nice about that is that you can put it in the way of the light, so that the light that's coming through is nice and diffused. So you have some options, but yeah, this is just a 12-inch, and this one is a Pro Master, and I've been happy with it.
Did you travel with a speed light?
It depends on the scenario. So if I can at all avoid it, I don't. But sometimes I'm shooting like a destination wedding, or when I'm working with tourism boards, sometimes that requires me to do a little bit more portraiture. So I only really tend to use artificial lighting for portrait scenarios. Otherwise, I try to keep it to like what you see is what you get. If I am traveling with a speed light, then usually I will include that. And then I also have the mag mod for my modifier, which creates this really nice diffused light that is just really attractive, because the light coming straight out of your speed light tends to be really harsh and it's just not as good. So yeah, modifiers are everything if you're using a speed light.
A few people are asking about how you back up your photos while you're traveling.
Sure. So I have a 2 terabyte hard drive that I bring with me. Basically, I have my traveling hard drives and then I have my home hard drives. And when I'm out traveling, I have like a fresh wipe on whatever hard drive it is, so that I'm not taking my full archives with me, because then if something should happen to it, I don't want to lose all of my important stuff. So I will bring the 2 terabyte fresh hard drive with me, and then at the end of every night, I just load my cards into the Chromebook and just back stuff up. I make sure I do it absolutely every single day, because otherwise you start to get this backlog and it's going to take longer than you might necessarily have time for. And so I just focus on getting those backups done. If for some reason I want to do a couple road edits or post or something, because I do post a lot of pictures on social media while I'm traveling, a lot of times what I'll do is find the image that I like in my camera and convert it to JPEG in camera. And then if I don't have connectivity to use Lightroom Mobile or something, like if I'm in a Wi-Fi dead zone when I'm trying to edit, I can edit with any number of other JPEG-specific programs that don't require connectivity. And then that way I can get my image all ready to go. I can even load it on my phone so I don't have to take my laptop with me to someplace with Wi-Fi, and then I'll just upload it from there.
And do you shoot in RAW when you travel?
I do. So I shoot entirely in RAW. I think there are very specific situations when it makes sense at this point to shoot in JPEG. The only time I would ever even consider it would be if I'm shooting super, super rapid fire burst and I'm concerned about the camera's write speed or the card's write speed or something like that. But for the most part, I shoot in RAW because it hedges your bets, it gives you more control, and it allows you to recreate those circumstances of what you saw in the scene, especially if you're in a scenario that's got weird dynamic range issues.
And why don't you tell us a little bit about the Enthusiast Guide to Travel Photography, just about who it's geared towards, like what kind of photographers you had in mind when you wrote it, and what other things people can learn in that book.
Sure. So actually, when I started writing it, I really struggled with how much to include because, I've done this for 12 years now, and I feel like you acquire so much knowledge and you have your own ways of doing things. So in the beginning, I said to Ted and to Jocelyn at Rocky Nook, the editors, I was like, what do I include? There's just so much stuff. And they specifically said, this doesn't have to be the Bible of travel photography. This has to be travel photography as it fits in your experience and what has worked for you. So basically, there's a lot of experiential stuff in here. I talk about how my background in portrait photography has influenced how I do travel photography. I talk about, in college, I studied anthropology, and that also has really informed how I do things when I'm in a new location or dealing with various cultures. So there's a lot of kind of the philosophical aspects of travel photography, how to be a good steward of the locations that you visit, leave things better than you left them, things like that. And then there's also a lot of practical stuff. So how to shoot in scenarios you might not be familiar with, how to deal with uncontrollable conditions. Like I mentioned in the video, sometimes you get to the top of a volcano and you're all ready to shoot it, and they tell you, you have 15 minutes here because if you stay any longer, the sulfur and the fumes are going to poison you. So everything goes out the window. All this planning that you had goes out the window, and you have to get that shot as quickly as possible. So I talk about those kinds of scenarios, how to think on the fly, how to prepare for your trip, not just physically, but mentally, how to gear up for it to the point where as soon as you get there, you can hit the ground running and you're not wasting any time or money, hopefully. So it's kind of just this all-encompassing view of travel photography. It is geared towards a photographer who maybe is an enthusiast, as it says in the title, or, professional even, but who hasn't necessarily delved in depth into any one of these subjects. The thing I love so much about travel photography is that it doesn't require you to specify. So a lot of times people will find out that I'm a photographer and they'll say what kind of photographer are you? Are you a this photographer? Are you a that photographer? And that drives me crazy because I think that we can be students of the world and photograph lots of different things, and we don't have to specify one thing. So with travel photography, you can be a food photographer, an architecture photographer, a nature and wildlife photographer. You can have all these different hats that you wear, and it's more location and experience based. So my hope is that the people that are reading it kind of want to branch out into other types of photography and want to use their travels as that jumping off point. And then importantly, towards the end of the book, I talk a lot about what to do when you get home again. So when you're traveling, you've been working and planning and prepping for this trip forever, and then you get home and it's this inevitable letdown where it's oh, okay, the fun part is over. And then a lot of times we sit down at our computer and the images don't stand up to the experience that we had. And you feel in the field when you're shooting you're doing it, you're nailing it, every shot is perfect. And then you get home and you look at them on your computer and they feel kind of flat and unexciting. So I talk a lot about how I deal with that and ways that you can kind of hedge your bets to recapture the magic that you felt in the moment when you were shooting. Because, you know, just like the trip is part of the experience, coming home and going through your pictures, that's an equally important part. So we have to find ways of making that feel special and carrying that energy straight through to the end.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're hitting the 1 hour mark, so I'm sure a lot of people are going to start to drop out soon. But this seems like a great time to end. So thank you so much for joining us today and showing us your pack and sharing that video with us. For everyone else who's tuned in, tomorrow you'll get an email with a replay link so you can watch this again if you want to. And you'll also have a discount code so you can purchase the Enthusiast Guide to Travel Photography at 40% off. Thank you, Jordana, and thank you everyone else for joining us.
Thank you.